Over the weekend, we saw the war between Israel and Iran continue to escalate, with a lot of back and forth from both militaries as well as what the West is saying. At this point, there appear to be conflicting statements coming from multiple sources as to whether the US will be directly involved or not. This in from antiwar.com. Sources: US will enter Israel's war with Iran. Sources familiar with the matter have told antiwar.com editorial director Scott Horton that the Trump administration is poised to enter Israel's aggressive war against Iran directly. US airstrikes on Iran could begin as soon as Monday. They are encouraging people to contact the White House and tell them that they don't want the US to enter this disastrous war, which could lead to heavy American casualties at US bases across the Middle East. This is what they are saying. They give a link to the email and phone number there. The US has supported the war by reportedly providing Israel with intelligence and helping intercept Iranian missiles and drones, but so far there have been no direct US attacks on Iran. Iranian officials have warned that Tehran would hit US bases in the region in response to any US strikes. Axios reported on Saturday that Israel is urging the US to join the war since Israel lacks the bunker-busting bombs necessary to do serious damage to Iran's Fordow plant, which is buried deep underground. An Israeli official told Axios that President Trump had previously suggested the US could strike Fordow. Trump himself said on Sunday that it was, quote, possible that the US would get directly involved in the war, which Israel launched early Friday morning with airstrikes across Iran. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu started the war under the pretext of preventing Iran from building a nuclear weapon, but it was the consensus of the US intelligence community that there was no evidence Iran was working towards a nuclear weapon, and Tehran made clear that they were ready to make a deal with the US that would significantly lower uranium enrichment levels and increase oversight of its nuclear program in exchange for US sanctions relief. Ali Larijani, an aide to the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has previously said that the one thing that would make Tehran reconsider its prohibition on the development of nuclear weapons would be a US or Israeli attack. Quote, "We are not moving towards," in brackets, nuclear weapons, "but if you do something wrong in the Iranian nuclear issue, you will force Iran to move towards that because it has to defend itself," Larijani said it on April 1st. Quote, "Iran does not want to do this, but it will have no choice," he added. "If at some point you," in brackets the US, "move towards bombing by yourself or through Israel, you will force Iran to make a different decision," end quote. Now, that article did reference a statement from March, just of this year, of US intelligence saying Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. The annual threat assessment said there's no evidence that the Ayatollah has reversed his ban on producing nuclear weapons at the time. And in fact, here is DNI Tulsi Gabbard assuring everyone in March that Iran was not pursuing a nuclear weapon. Take a listen.
Iran's cyber operations and capabilities also present a serious threat to US networks and data. The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
So that was just less than 3 short months ago. What changed? Well, according to Tucker Carlson, there are warmongers who want US involved in the Iran-Israel war, and he's actually named them. He says at some point they will have to all answer for this. As Iranian ballistic missiles rain down on Tel Aviv and US forces are reportedly helping to repel them, Tucker Carlson has called out those who seem to want the US to get involved as warmongers. This is in from Modernity. The Iranian counterstrike came after Israel launched a massive campaign of precision strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities and missile sites. Scientists involved with Iranian nuclear work were also reportedly targeted for assassination, along with Iranian Revolutionary Guard leadership. President Trump declared Friday morning that Iran must make a deal immediately before it is completely obliterated. It may already be too late, though, as Israel says red lines have been crossed by Iran targeting civilian areas in Tel Aviv. And we've seen all of that footage all over X on the weekend. Taking to X in response to the escalation, Tucker Carlson wrote, quote, "The real divide isn't between people who support Israel and people who support Iran or the Palestinians. The real divide is between those who casually encourage violence and those who seek to prevent it. Between warmongers and peacemakers," he added. Who are the warmongers? Carlson continued, emphasizing they would include anyone who's calling Donald Trump today to demand airstrikes and other direct US military involvement in a war with Iran. He then went on to name Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Rupert Murdoch, Ike Perlmutter, and Miriam Adelson. Quote, at some point, they will all have to answer for this, but you should know their names now, Carlson urged. Tucker has, for the past several years now, warned that it would be catastrophic for the US to get dragged into a war involving Iran, highlighting the potential for thousands of US military casualties and economic collapse due to surging oil prices. A very real threat right now. Carlson has argued that fears of Iran's nuclear capabilities are being exaggerated by neoconservative factions and has dismissed claims that Iran poses an imminent threat. He published this monster post earlier last week that has garnered over 7 million views. From Tucker Carlson directly, Mark Levin was at the White House today lobbying for war with Iran. To be clear, Levin has no plans to fight in this or any other war. He's demanding that American troops do it. We need to stop Iran from building nuclear weapons. He and like-minded ideologues in Washington are now arguing. They're just weeks away. If this sounds familiar, it's because the same people have been making the same claim since at least the 1990s. It's a lie. In fact, there is zero credible intelligence that suggests Iran is anywhere near building a bomb or has plans to. None. Anyone who claims otherwise is ignorant or dishonest. If the US government knew Iran was weeks from possessing a nuclear weapon, we'd be at war already. Iran knows this, which is why they aren't building one. Iran also knows it's unwise to give up its weapons program entirely. Muammar Gaddafi tried that and wound up sodomized with a bayonet. As soon as Gaddafi disarmed, NATO killed him. Iran's leaders saw that happen. They learned the obvious lesson. So why is Mark Levin once again hyperventilating about weapons of mass destruction? To distract you from the real goal, which is regime change. Young Americans heading back to the Middle East to topple yet another government. Virtually no one will say this out loud. America's record of overthrowing foreign leaders is so embarrassingly counterproductive that regime change has become a synonym for disaster. Officially, no one supports it. So instead of telling the truth about their motives, they manufacture hysteria. A country like Iran can never have the bomb. They'll nuke Los Angeles. We have to act now. They don't really mean this, Tucker says, and you can tell they don't by what they omit. At least two of Iran's neighbors, both Islamic nations, already have nuclear weapons. That fact should scare the hell out of Mark Levin, yet for some reason he never mentions it. How come? Because it's not the weapons he hates, it's the ideology of the Iranian government, which is why he's lobbying to overthrow it. It goes without saying that there are very few Trump voters who'd support a regime change war in Iran. Donald Trump has argued loudly against reckless lunacy like this. Trump ran for president as a peace candidate. That's what made him different from conventional Republicans. It's why he won. A war with Iran would amount to a profound betrayal of his supporters. It would end his presidency. That may explain why so many of Trump's enemies are advocating for it. And then there's the question of the war itself. Iran may not have nukes, but it has a fearsome arsenal of ballistic missiles, many of which are aimed at US military installations in the Gulf, as well as at our allies and at critical energy infrastructure. The first week of a war with Iran could easily kill thousands of Americans. It could also collapse our economy, as surging oil prices trigger unmanageable inflation. Consider the effects of $30 gasoline. But the second week of the war could be even worse. Iran isn't Iraq or Libya or even North Korea. While it's often described as a rogue state, Iran has powerful allies. It's now part of a global bloc called BRICS, which represents the majority of the world's landmass, population, economy, and military power. Iran has extensive military ties with Russia. It sells the overwhelming majority of its oil exports to China. Iran isn't alone. An attack on Iran could very easily become a world war. We'd lose. None of these are far-fetched predictions. Most of them comport with the Pentagon's own estimates. Many Americans would die during a war with Iran. People like Mark Levin don't seem to care about this. It's not relevant to them. Instead, they insist that Iran give up all uranium enrichment regardless of its purpose. They know perfectly well that Iran will never accept that demand. They'll fight first. And of course, that's the whole point of pushing for it, to box the Trump administration into a regime change war in Iran. The one thing that people like Mark Levin don't want is a peaceful solution to the problem of Iran, despite the obvious benefits to the United States. They denounce anyone who advocates for a deal as a traitor and a bigot. They tell us with a straight face that Long Island native Steve Witkoff is a secret tool of Islamic monarchies. They'll say or do whatever it takes. They have no limits. These are scary people. Pray that Donald Trump ignores them. During his latest podcast this week, Carlson spoke with economist and analyst Jeffrey Sachs, who argued that the US deep state is pushing for catastrophic wars with both Iran and Russia. Sachs expressed confidence that the Trump administration could avoid being drawn into such conflicts, particularly emphasizing the potential for Trump to end the Ukraine war. The interview sparked various reactions, with some praising Sachs' insight, while others criticized him as a globalist advocating for UN-led governance. Well, all of this is clearly dividing MAGA, and many are voicing their strong opposition to this war and US involvement. We'll take a closer look at some of that later in the broadcast in segment 3, but we want to conclude this segment with this. Wars are always accompanied by propaganda, on both sides, by the way. It is how consent is obtained for blowing up innocent civilians who really have nothing to do with the military-industrial complex, bankers, and those pulling the strings at the top who want, in fact, need this war very much. Remember our broadcast with economist and forecaster Martin Armstrong? He said economies are failing. The fake fiat system cannot go on like this for much longer. And when this happens, a war generally follows. It's how they quote, unquote, rebuild. Now, there are many motives for this war, but that is one of them. We will do our best to give you the facts as this continues, free of the propaganda that will definitely be coming our way over the coming days.